Welcome back to Data Science on the Fly. So in this tutorial, we are going to be going more in detail into what the head and tail methods can do and what you can do with the shape method. So today's goal is we're going to be working with the fraud data, and we're going to be talking about head, shape, and actually head, tail, and shape. All right, great. So I'm going to be a little quicker about running through the first steps, but I think it's important to get some practice there. So again, this is the fraud data set, and you can find it on Kaggle. There's a lot of other data sets available on kaggle.com. And then first we need to bring in library. So today we're just going to bring in the pandas library, which is the most important library. You need it to use DataFrames because that's how you bring your CSV file or your Excel file into a Python data frame. So import pandas, we alias it as PD, and then command enter to run that. Great, it's run, we see the one there. And then from there, I'm going to declare this variable fraud underscore df. Df stands for data frame, and I'm going to use the read CSV method to bring in the data set. Now, the file path is what goes inside of the parentheses. For me, I'm using my file path. Yours might be different, so make sure you're using yours. Okay, command enter on that one. Might take a second. Okay, while it's doing that, yep, it's run it. So the first thing is we're going to explore the head method. And we've talked about this before. So if I just wanted to see the first 5 rows of my data frame, I could type frauddf.head, put nothing in the parentheses, and I would get back the first 5 rows. And then if I wanted to look at the last 5 rows of my data frame, then I would do .tail, nothing in the parentheses, and get back the last 5 rows. Let me actually just, so I can, yep. All right, so fraud underscore df.tail gives you the last 5 rows, so 5 rows from the bottom. And then fraud df.head, that .head method gives you 5 rows from the top. But I can actually pass in some values here. So if I wanted to get the first 10 rows from the top, I could still use the head method, but this time pass in the number 10. And that gives me indices 0 to 9, the first 10 rows. Similarly, if I wanted to do fraud df.tail, get the last 10 rows, I could do that. And it doesn't have to be 10. I could do 12. And give me the last 12. At some point in a Jupyter notebook, though, the space allotted to showing you what's being returned is not going to show you all of the things, like all of the rows you've returned. For example, if I did fraud df.50, okay, actually this is working great. This is showing all 50. Let's see what happens if I do fraud df. Yep, okay. So if I use this tail method, but then I say I want the last 100 rows, you see how there's ellipses all across this. So it's not showing me all of the returned values. But if I said, you know what, I want only the last 100 rows, and this is how I'm getting them, and then I want to store them in a variable like that, right, last underscore 100, then this would store, even if it's not showing 100 rows, it would still store 100 rows into this variable. So let's actually see that play out. Now I can use .shape, right? So what I should be seeing is rows equals 100, and then columns equals whatever the original column value was. Yep, look at that, 100 rows. Even if it didn't show it, it's still there. So that's really useful if you need to segment your data frame in that way. So .head and .tail are good just to check out your data frame, start building your familiarity with it, but then you can also use them to get a subset of your data frame, assign it to a variable, and then just work with that subset. Really depends on your data analysis scenario. A lot of the tools I show you here, it's not like every single analysis uses every single one of these tools. There are some best practices across all data analysis projects, but other than that, it really depends on your analysis project, what you're trying to accomplish. All right, so we've talked about the head method, the tail method. Now let's talk about shape. So we started with this shape method here, got back 100 rows. Okay, great. So what I want to discuss with you is you can get just the row count or just the column count as well, if you need to for some reason. So going back to our original fraud data frame, if I do fraud df.shape, I get back that 6.36 million rows and the 11 columns. But now if I just wanted the row count, I could do fraud underscore df.shape and then in brackets put 0. And this part is saying I want the shape, so I want the rows and columns. And then after that, get me the first value in these parentheses here. And the first value is the number of rows. So I get just the row count. Similarly, if I take this, just copy it and change this one from 0 to 1, it's going to get me 11. That's what it should give me, the column count. So remember, with Python, your indices start at 0. So this is at the 0th position, and this is at the first position, and that's why you're using a 0 here to get this one, and a 1 here to get this one. Now, just to see what happens, let's see what happens if we try to index something at the second position. Error. Tuple index out of range. There is no 2. There's nothing at the second position here. It's just 0 and 1 in this tuple. Okay, great. Now let's see what happens if we do fraud underscore df dot shape -1. What's going to happen then? Just out of curiosity. What? It gives us back the column count. Why? Because in any kind of array in Python, a list, a tuple, when you're indexing, if you want the final element, you can use -1. And just like tail, where's tail? Just like tail starts from the bottom and goes up in a data frame, -1, that indicates start from the end of your array, start counting at the last position, and then move to the front. So this -1 gives me back the final value in our tuple, which is 11. And now if I change this to -2, look, I get back the second to last value, the number of rows. So in review, we've talked about not only can you use the head and tail methods in Python, but you can actually pass an argument into the parentheses, and that argument specifically is the number of rows you want to get back. And then we talked about how even if you can't see all of the rows that come back in a Jupyter Notebook, if you assign that method and then the argument passed to it, all of that to a variable, then all of those rows in that subset that you've created will be part of that variable. And finally, we discussed using the shape method to get back rows and columns, but then also just getting back the rows, just getting back the columns, and using -1 and -2. So negative values to start from the end and then index to the front. All right, until next time.